Much. Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back when I enjoyed life, I was a builder and developer.
That was yesterday.
That was several years ago.
That was today, I hope.
In South Padre Island, Texas. And I know that you're in a different area, however, you're familiar with the different regions. And did I understand in the introduction that we got from our chairman, Mr. Oliver, that you were from the Gulf area?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. I grew up in Rockport, Texas, on the Gulf Coast, not far from Padre Island.
I see. Yes, I'm very.
We claim him as an Alaskan, though.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no, I claim him as a Texan. How's that? No, it's interesting. You are familiar with the interest that I have in that down there, and it's really just to clear some things up. First of all, down in Texas. And there's a lot of interest, I have to say, in my state of Oklahoma. It's people, that's the closest coast we go to. And there are a lot of industries that are very active down there. So we're interested in the coast. They went actually on where you go out, the number of miles you go out that's under state jurisdiction. It was 3 miles. It's now 9 miles. Is that correct?
Texas is 9-mile territorial sea.
Yeah, but at one time wasn't it only 3 miles?
Not in my lifetime, sir.
I see. Okay. Well, my staff is wrong on that then. My interest is when things that are unforeseen come up. How do you handle that? And do you have the jurisdiction that we're talking about right now? Both of you are talking about. Is that primarily just the federal jurisdiction we're talking about? Or you also oversee the state jurisdiction? In this case, Texas, but I'm sure it'd be true in other states.
No, sir. We, Senator, Mr. Chairman, we do not manage inside state territorial waters. We only manage, for example, red snapper outside the state waters. We have to take into account what the states do in their state water seasons in order to, which is why we originally were only able to set a 3-day season in federal waters for Gulf red snapper in 2017. Obviously, we've implemented regulations that have changed that, relaxed that for the remainder of the summer. But whether and to what extent we can do that in the future remains to be seen. I think it depends on pending stock assessments. There's pending litigation on the measures we implemented this year. There's potential legislation that you might introduce that all could affect what we may do in what may be the situation in 17, but the short answer to your question is the states essentially manage what happens within their waters, whether it be 3 or 9 miles or otherwise, and we have to react and sort of make up the difference on the federal side, and that's where that adjustment in federal seasons comes in, and we obviously we're not enthusiastic about publishing a 3-day federal season, but that was where the math left us, sir. Originally.
So we actually did have a 3-day season for the entire year?
For federal waters, that was the original season for 2017. We have since published a subsequent regulation that is extending that season for some 39 days, I believe, now. Yeah. That is being litigated or challenged, but I don't know what the outcome of that will ultimately be.
Well, it may be litigated or challenged, but they're doing it right now.
Yes, sir.
And Dr. Quinn, I know that you're in a different region up there, but a lot of the same principles apply. When you are making the assessments that Mr. Oliver talked about, there are a lot of sources for that. How much do you depend on in terms of recreational users reporting data, and how do you see that? The reason I'm asking this is my exposure is to the recreational people. They're the ones that feel like they're always getting a short end of the stick, and I just wanted to see how you view them, their input.
I think the recreational fishermen is very important on the East Coast, in particular in New England. We use data that they gather in our assessments. Every regional science center has a way to plug in this recreational data into their stock assessments. The question is, we're going to make sure that it's high-quality data that we plug in and where it gets plugged into the stock assessment process. So our council's got a great relationship with our recreational industry, and we'll work with them closely to get additional data.
How do you do this? Again, I'm talking about South Padre Island or the south coast of Texas. Every once in a while, with no warning, no predictability, we have the thing called the red tide. Red tide comes in, dramatically changes the populations of fish and all of that. How do the unknown factors, how do you address those in making the assessments that are necessary?
You know, over time, you'd have, you know, the impact of that is not going to be able to be seen that day, the day the red tide comes in or some catastrophic situation. It's more time series analysis and over the long term, see what happens if there's a trend created, there's going to be a decline in stock. So at the point in time that the red tide comes in, you can't really make the assessment. It's more over the longer term.
Sure, yeah. All right, well, my time has expired, but I'm very interested in this, in how this works out in terms of the federal versus the state, and I appreciate your witnesses.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe.